What's up, peeps and peepettes? Again, this is Spec-Son coming at you with the second video concerning WCW 1991. This time, it's the top 5 things that I absolutely enjoyed about World Championship Wrestling in 1991. Things that still remain in my mind today. Some of the best stuff I actually saw in the business occurred on this list. So, many people say that WCW 1991 had its issues. I'm the first one to say it. It had a whole lot of good stuff too. And as the last time, I'm going to go in descending order, 5 all the way to 1 on this awesome list right here that I compiled. I came prepared, peeps and peepettes. I came prepared. Alright, let's go at number 5 here. And it was the introduction of the WCW Light-Heavyweight Championship. Now, the WCW Light-Heavyweight Championship was something I think the company thought of at the spur of the moment. I don't think this was something that they thought would last a very long time, and obviously it didn't, although I think that's their fault, not the wrestlers or the talent that they had. Bottom line is this. WCW at the time were trying new things out in 1991, especially the later tad end of 1991. They had brought in a lot of fresh talent, a lot of good talent, by the way. They had some guys who were under the 235-pound weight mark who were not necessarily getting an opportunity at some of the major championships in WCW at the time. So what they thought was, in my opinion, alright, let's go do something that hasn't been done in the business for a while. You know, given that Dusty was the booker, and Dusty, I think, always had liking to some of the light heavyweights. You look in NWA in the Crockett years of Denny Brown, Lasertron, George South, guys of this nature who were considered light heavyweights to a degree and had prominent roles on Crockett television, World Championship Wrestling, Worldwide Wrestling, etc., and house shows. The NWA Light Heavyweight Championship meant something. So I think Dusty, in my opinion, Dusty was the driving force on this. Alright, let's go create a Light Heavyweight Championship. And he did. They did. Beautiful design belt by Reggie Parks. It's a very, very beautiful belt. A great tournament as well that started in the tail end of the summer of 91 and continued all the way into Halloween Havoc, in which Flying Brian Pillman, the new reinstated Flying Brian Pillman, wins the championship against Richard Morton of the York Foundation in an incredible match. One of the first shows on the card. Really, really good stuff. And a tidbit to that was that Nick Patrick had the debut and very rarely utilized after that referee cam that really didn't add much to the match. But it was kind of unique to even see these guys, to see a referee with this helmet on. I think the whole point was to see the action up close. It really never worked. But the bottom line is the Light Heavyweight Championship was a very good idea in WCW. It's the precursor to the Cruiserweight title that would surface 3 years after the WCW Light Heavyweight title was defunct. Great memories of that championship. I think Brad Armstrong was the last one to hold it. We would get a great storyline between Jushin Thunder Liger and Brian Pillman right after this, shortly after this. So that belt was a really, really good productive belt in WCW for the very short time frame that it was in place. But it never would have taken place if it did not begin in the tournament in 1991 for the WCW Lightweight title. Let's see here. Number 4, and it has to do with Brian Pillman again. And this is the Brian Pillman's coming into his own party. Now, Brian Pillman, you got to look. Prior to 1991, he was teaming with the Z-Man, Tom Zink. They became the United States Tag Team Champions at some point. At one point in 1990, they weren't a great team, and I think 1990 was a step back for Brian Pillman because prior to 1990, he was feuding with Lex Luger, out of all people, and that's heel Lex Luger. And Lex Luger was, I think, that was his first time we really saw that kind of charisma come out of Lex Luger as a heel. And he was in a really, really good storyline with Lex Luger in '89, but it was stopped in 1990 because he was feuding with Brian Pillman was feuding with the Midnight Express, teaming with the Z-Man. And I thought that was a step back for him. 1991, that changed. He was in a great epic feud with Barry Windham that eventually resulted in an awesome tape fist match at Super Brawl 91. We'll comment on that in that spec reviews of Super Brawl 91, by the way. Phenomenal match. Phenomenal build. Leading all the way to Pillman having to leave WCW since he lost a tag team match involving Barry Windham and himself for 90 days. He resurfaces in a just awful character of the Yellow Dog that just did not work at all, in my opinion. But he resurfaces after that in a light heavyweight championship role, becomes the light heavyweight champion. Just a phenomenal period, a year for Flying Brian Pillman. It was really the year in which he came into his own as a character. And this was all as a babyface. Later in 1992, he'll turn a heel. But a lot of the good stuff that happened with Brian Pillman in his career, to me, can really be traced into 1991. Because that was the year, that was his coming out party, if you ask me. Now, going to number 3 on this countdown, the transformation of the total package Lex Luger. I've already mentioned Lex Luger in '89 turning a heel. But in 1991 was a defining year for Lex Luger to me. Luger, at that point in time, to me, had done everything he could possibly do in a babyface capacity. I really wasn't in favor of him turning babyface at all in 1990 to begin with after Sting got injured. But I think it had reached its climax. And the bottom line is this. The door was open. And I don't think there was really any plan at the moment to turn Lex Luger. But I really think that things changed when Ric Flair left. And the WCW had the top 10 list, which was, as I mentioned before in the previous video, it's a great idea. The top 10 in WCW, and Luger was the number 1 ranked contender. It was the number 2 contender. I think when Ric Flair left, it kind of changed. I think he was the number 1 contender since he was the United States champion, and Barry was number 2. But he ends up winning the WCW World Heavyweight Championship as the United States Heavyweight Champion. First time that had been done in like 20 plus years of the business. Not many people talk about that. And back then, that was a very significant stat. He is aligned with Handsome Harley Race and Mr. Hughes. Mr. Hughes becomes his bodyguard, and his advisor now is Harley Race. And he becomes a heel. And the way that whole storyline went about, was orchestrated, and how it went about was nothing short of phenomenal to me. Because instead of being all aggressive, doing the promo work and stuff like that, WCW did a very, very smart thing with Lex Luger. They allowed Harley Race to do most of the talking. And they allowed Lex Luger to kind of change his style. During this period of time, Lex Luger started to adopt Harley Race's finishing move, the power driver, and the pile driver, and he used it, did it really well. Seemed to do it really, really safe, and with a lot of good heat surrounding him. He is in a feud with Barry Windham. He becomes a pretty good heel in a feud with, I think this is where you really saw his good work come out. Now through his promos, in addition to his wrestling, and his feud with Ron Simmons. Ron Simmons is also getting a bit pushed this year as well. After basically being kicked out of Doom and beating Butch Reed at Super Brawl 91, but that's for another story. And I think you could really trace this back at the Great American Bash, but at the Clash of the Champions Fall Brawl 1991, the same event in which the Enforcers won the World Tag Team title in that Tag Team Tournament final. Excuse me. Lex Luger is in a feud with Ron Simmons. They're going to fight at Halloween Havoc for the world title in 2 out of 3 falls match. They have a whole press conference set up. Dustin Rhodes is pretty much training Ron Simmons for this match. On one side you have Ron and his wife, and Dusty. On the other side you have Mr. Hughes, you have Harley Race, and of course you have the World Heavyweight Champion himself, Lex Luger. And Lex Luger but right after he signs the contract, basically tells Ron this. You know, you're a fine athlete. You are deserving #1 contender. However, after I beat you at Halloween Havoc, I'm going to need a really good professional chauffeur. And after that, all hell breaks loose. Ron Simmons tries to attack Lex Luger, and Lex Luger just goes into the limo and just leaves the area. Phenomenal way to set up that whole match. Of course, he eventually wins and hangs on to the title. And probably more than anything, the next thing that I'm going to talk about in terms of Lex Luger in 1991, in terms of his transformation, is that he turns on one of his best friends, Sting. Now, in 1991, excuse me, Sting was being attacked by so many people. It turned out to be Abdullah the Butcher and Cactus Jack, but Lex Luger was behind all of it. And eventually, you had a long, I'd say about 3 or 4 month storyline between Lex Luger and Sting that culminated in Lex Luger winning losing the world title to Sting at Super Brawl 2 in Milwaukee in 1992 in February that year. And also, you know, he lost the Battle Bowl in 1991 to Sting too. But great transformation for Lex Luger. Just too bad he left the company in 1992. So I think they still, his heel character had legs to it. All right, coming in at number 2 to me was the end of the Jim Herd era. Shortly after, and I didn't know this until so many years later, Jim Herd was fired from WCW shortly after Ric Flair left the company to go to WWE after his contract was not renewed. So, you know, or negotiated for that matter. It was kind of a referendum of all the crap that Jim Herd put so many people do in WCW that you've heard about. Jim Cornette has ranted about him. You know, of course, Ric Flair has done it as well. So has Paulie Dangerously. I mean, the list really goes on and on with so many guys who just couldn't stand Jim Herd. I never met the guy, never worked with the guy, never seen the guy in person. But you really can't deny all the people that really couldn't stand him. And also, you can't deny the fact, the really, really true fact of what you saw at the time and some of the stuff you just couldn't stand. You know, it's head scratching with Jim Herd. But Jim Herd was ousted from WCW shortly after Ric Flair left the company. And it was no surprise that a lot of the good stuff that happened in 1991, the majority of it occurred after he left. That's just my personal opinion. And I haven't even heard nothing from the guy since or about the guy. So he was a guy that really just didn't even belong in pro wrestling. And the fact that he lasted in wrestling as long as he did is, I guess many people say, is a disgrace. But that's for those people who knew him. I didn't know. And number 1, for the best thing that I like more than anything in WCW 1991, the introduction of the Dangerous Alliance and new characters such as Johnny B. Bad, the Diamond Stud, Dustin Rhodes, the Hardliners, the York Foundation, Bad Street. As much bad characters that you saw in WCW in 1991, to me there was equally, if not more, good characters that you saw in 1991 in WCW. People like to talk a lot about Johnny B. Bad, but Johnny B. Bad, to me, was a really good character and good hand. Mark Merrill in 1991 in WCW, and even as the years went by. Dustin Rhodes got his start in 91. He had a lot of good stuff. The Hardliners, who didn't even get enough traction. The York Foundation, Thomas Rich, a.k.a. Tommy Rich, Richard Morton, a.k.a. Ricky Morton, and Terrence Taylor, a.k.a. Terry Taylor, with the York Foundation. A great concept that didn't even get enough legs. But the Dangerous Alliance is the cream of the crop here. Rick Rude returning to the Crockett/WCW area, NWA area, as the Halloween Phantom of all people at Halloween 91, becoming the United States champion, defeating Sting at a Clash of the Champions event. The Cruncher, Layers of Bisco, and Arn Anderson, the tag team champions. Beautiful Bobby Eaton turning heel again and aligning himself and eventually becoming tag team champions with Arn in that year. I mean, there's more. Stunning Steve Austin, the World Television Champion. Now he's not with Lady Blossom, and he's now with Medusa. Medusa enters the fray as well. There's just so many good hands in the Dangerous Alliance that it was phenomenal. And, just a testament to Paulie Dangerously and his way to talk and those wrestlers altogether. But thanks for watching this, folks. I hope you check out my spec reviews. I'll check you out later.